On this episode of A Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I are discussing the importance of self-awareness and self-regulation as it applies to our quest. Stay tuned.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good. You know what we haven't done? We haven't really commented on our new song, our new entry music.
Oh, I like it. Oh, yeah. It's pretty. Yeah, I like
And then
it.
he just.
It comes in with the beats and stuff. Yeah, I really like that. Yeah. You picked a good one this time. I like that one.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's a little,
Well, every time I watch them, I'm like, automatically, I'm like, hey.
Yeah, well, that's the idea. It's like the quest doesn't have to be boring.
My quest isn't boring. That's for sure.
You can't really have a quest without some music. It's like a road trips.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to have some music. Didn't
we do that on our road trip?
Yes.
Well, we were like, wasn't it like 4:00 in the morning? We were jamming out to all kinds of like,
what
were we listening to? James
Taylor station. We
were
listening to
what else? It was good music.
It was Hotel California station.
Okay. Yeah. Was that what it's called?
Yeah. Well, it's on Spotify, and then we also listened to 90s R&B. Yeah.
That was we listened to that one on our drive home, remember?
Yeah, that was
and we were just jamming out.
Campbell, some SWV.
Yeah, those are some bangers, those ones.
I guess so. We can need
Okay. Let me save our audience.
I mean, you know what's funny? We try to do this, and it's supposed to be insightful and professional. And, we're like prepared with cue cards and all this stuff, but you have to enjoy it. Isn't that the whole point?
Yes.
The point is to be able to
definitely
to have some fun in the things that you're doing, and if it's not professional, whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a little bitterness with me, right?
No,
I gotta work on my bitterness. Just a little bit, right? It's like the world could rob us a little bit of stuff. You gotta enjoy what you do.
You can't be a stiff about everything that you do in life. You have to have a little bit of fun. You know what I mean?
You definitely need to have some fun.
And I like that. I think that that was one of my I don't do New Year's resolutions, but our goals and things like that. When we talk about that, that I wanted to be able to have fun this year. I have fun anyways, but even like through this dissertation process, yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm just like, I'm freaking miserable. This is terrible, but I'm like, I want to enjoy it. So, even when I was writing last night, I was like, oh, okay, I'm feeling this. This is cool.
I mean, like, if you're not enjoying the process and if you're not able to make light of the situation, it becomes a task and it becomes tedious.
Yep. I agree.
And you have to have some lightness, some fun.
Yeah, you have to have levity in everything that you do.
Exactly.
I think that's important. So so that's what we're doing.
Absolutely.
We have fun when we do these episodes.
I have a blast doing this. This is like by far my favorite part of doing this whole thing.
Yeah.
I can't wait till we begin to grow an audience and we could actually start interacting with
interacting with our audience. That'll be fun.
That's another part that I miss in my professional life. Other than that, don't miss anything else. Yeah.
I don't blame you.
Bitterness again.
Look.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're talking today about self-awareness and self-regulation. And I got my little note cards.
I got my little cards
I'm ready
too,
to go.
I'm
ready to go. So this kind of keeps us on track. So I like this.
I like this too. Yeah.
All right. So you want to get started? So I know that we've already had an episode on emotional and social intelligence. We talked about that. Was kind of like you interviewing me, which is kind of different.
No, it's cool. We're going to be kind of like talking about each other. Yeah.
Right. But I think now what you're doing is you're sort of diving into those domains. What we're doing is diving into those domains, and you want to get into that aspect of it, applying it to the individual.
Yeah.
Right. So with that said, we want to talk about self-awareness first. So what is self-awareness?
So, the simple definition, and I like this topic of social and emotional intelligence because I think it opens the door to other things, because it has to do with our individual life and how we interact in the world, right? So Daniel Goleman defines emotional intelligence and self-awareness as the ability to understand our emotions and situationally speaking, being able to understand what they are. Right.
And you mean understand emotions as we're going through them?
As we're going through them is to be able to manage that. And that's a very, it's a proactive way of being able to deal with emotions. But self-awareness to me and self-awareness is being able to manage those emotions as you go through things.
Or be aware of them.
Being aware of them, right? But I like to expand that definition because since we are a soul's quest, we want to deal not just with scientific ways of dealing with things, but also diving deeper into what the self is, you know? So one of the things that I believe that we have to use in defining what self-awareness is, it's also an ability to understand the psyche roadmap, our psyche, and the different components of our psyche as Carl Jung defines it, you know? So to me, self-awareness, it's the ability to be able to understand our emotions, but also being able to understand the psyche for our psyche blah 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 blah.
Yeah, we're both blah, 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 today.
Blah 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 blah.
Just get it out.
Yeah, the psychic forces that we have within ourselves.
Okay.
So we have to understand them both in order to really be self-aware.
Okay. And so what is that exactly? The psyche part of this. What do you mean by that?
So the psyche part, psyche. Oh my God.
What's going on? Let's stop for a second. Take a deep breath. All right, here we are. We got this.
So in the psyche, right? And I will put a diagram up so that people could actually see it.
Okay.
You know, there are different components of who we are as individuals and our idea of the self, right? The first part is our ego. And our ego really is what we know, what has become conscious to us through our either subconscious efforts or as part of social conditioning, right? These are the things that give us somewhat our persona, who we believe ourselves to be. You know, so that's one aspect of the psyche. The other aspects of the psyche are part of what are called the subconscious, either in the individual subconscious or the collective subconscious, right? And the components of those things are things like the animus and the animus, which are the female and male aspects of our personalities. And those are simply ways of putting it because a lot of people nowadays feel very... the social correctness way it is like the female male is not the proper way to think. I want people to take a look at it as polarities within ourselves.
Okay, instead of the pronouns and
instead
stuff,
of the pronouns, it's just we have polar opposites energies within ourselves. From a feminine standpoint and also from a masculine standpoint, and both men and females have these forces within ourselves. So that is another aspect of our subconscious that we need to be able to understand and be aware of that, right? The other aspect of it is the shadow part, is the dark aspects within ourselves, the challenging things, you know, it's getting to know those type of things, what some people might call Machiavellian and primal instincts and the bottom chakra, the dark aspects of our soul. Those are aspects of our subconscious, which ultimately at the end of it all are all part of our self. So self-awareness, in the definition of the map of the subconscious and the whole conscious ego, it's ultimately the totality of being the self.
So you're saying these polarities, the dark, and then this, I just lost my train of thought. The dark side of us, the ego side of us, and then the feminine and the male part that you were talking about, the polarities there are part of the self-awareness component.
They have to be, because
So that's like another level of self-awareness.
it is another level of self-awareness. You know, I mean, understanding emotions are it's one part. You know, so one of the things that Daniel Goleman talks about is emotions. You have to be able to regulate emotions, and there are about 6 to 8 major emotions. You know, fear, right? Anger. I just want to make sure that I get them all right. Fear, anger, sadness, joy, surprise, and disgust. Right? So these are primal fears. These are the things that we needed to be able to survive. So if we were out there hunting and our bodies felt fear, we either stood our grounds and fought, or we flew away to run away from danger.
Flight, yeah.
You know, fight or flight. So these emotions are very important. In our modern world, we still feel those emotions, and those emotions are important to understand based on the situation. So if a person feels fear now in our society, a lot of it mostly has to do with anxieties or what the future holds, of what or what an outcome of something that I'm doing is going to be, of not having enough money, not having enough security. So not knowing exactly what's going to happen in a new world with the situations with COVID and the restrictions of it. So that fear manifests itself into anxiety, you know. But this is 6 basic fears that we really need to understand, because they manifest themselves in situations in which we have to confront, and that happens on our daily lives. However, if we're not fully aware of the subconscious parts of our personality, of ourselves, then we run into the dangers of doing things that ultimately are not good for us.
Do you think, just out of curiosity, and I don't know, because you have read more about these things than I have, and I haven't really gotten into this aspect, the young, you know, like all these theories, but do you think that has something to do with, like when people don't know their dark side and these different feelings that come from that, do you think that the theoretical part that I was talking about in our last episode about emotional, you know, the self-awareness component, like that's just a superficial layer?
It's the gateway.
Okay. So this is the gateway to understanding the subconscious level of us. So we have to put those things together to really have a level of self-awareness. Okay.
But so for instance, like I always use this example, right, of young people afraid of what the future holds. You know, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what career to take. I don't know which direction to take. There's all these things happening, right? So there's a fear in there. And this happens to a lot of people, you know, regardless, you know, when they embark on a quest to become a professional, they have those fears. They have those things. And once they surpass those, right, that energy gets integrated into them, and they feel more confident about who they are, and much better about who they are. Right. Later on, as you progress in life, you either get stuck because you achieved a certain level, and you see it amongst professionals that they become very one-sided. You know, professionals who you ultimately focus on success. That's a very masculine energy. Not to say that it's negative, because that's not what it is. It's just the achievement and success. And then the other side of that, or the opposite of that, is being able to balance, to have you know, self-care, or being more connected to nature, more community-based. So you have those two dualities, and a lot of people have an issue or struggle creating and merging those two together. You know, because
it's a marriage of the two.
It's a marriage of the two energies. Again, it simplifies to call them masculine and feminine, but the idea is that you have to merge these energies. You have to know this in order to be able to live a more complete life,
fulfilling. Yeah.
Because you could go to one side and you heard the stories and you heard the anecdotes of people that this is all they've done their whole life. They dismiss their family and that aspect of the feeling good stuff because they're wanting to be successful. But before they know it, everything's gone. They end up either alone or separated from their families, you know? And that's something that happens when it comes to these situations. So you have to understand that the shadow part, it's not necessarily something that is evil. What it is that there are natural impulses, you know, that need to be addressed, and they need to be understood to generate a greater potential, to generate and bring out more of the potential that's inside of us.
So what you're saying then, just to recap what you just said a few minutes ago, sorry, my contact is bothering me, is that with people when people do that, go to one extreme or to the other, when people become polarized, they end up missing the things that could have been fulfilling or could have fulfilled them.
Yeah.
But I would counter with some people that is fulfilling to them, or at least they think that it is. And then they go through their whole life. And at the end of their life, they're just like, wow, I have nothing. I have no family. I have no kids. I have nothing. You know what I mean? Or I lost people in my life. And do you think
you temporarily ignore it and you hide it and you push it under the rug, underneath this, like you mentioned, you know, social emotional intelligence is like the superficial level of that entire iceberg, right? Which is true, but it's in the same way. In order for those emotions to not, you know, because emotions are the gateway to the subconscious and getting to know ourselves much deeper, right? If you don't listen to those emotions, and you replace those emotions or hide those emotions with other stuff, that subconscious will manifest itself somehow. It needs to. It has to.
It will.
You know,
it'll emerge.
I mean, think about addicts, and one of the things that I've been researching is AA. You know, and the main thing about AA, the first part is you got to admit that you have an issue.
Why are you researching AA? Just asking.
No, I'm not. You know, I don't drink this. But
I thought maybe you were doing it because I'm in my happy. Yeah, I don't know. What you doing here? Do I need to know something?
AA has been proven to be something that is powerful. You know, and it's helped a lot of people. And the premise of it is that, number one, you have to accept that. And number two, you have to accept that there's something greater than you. And that greater part, and we could get into the conversations as to define it. But a component of that great part starts with understanding our subconscious and the different aspects when it comes to the ego, understanding what the ego is, understanding what that my individual subconscious and the collective subconscious, the different archetypes, which are, you know, the animus of the animus, the shadow, and so forth and so on. There's a lot of archetypes that we could talk about: the child, the parent, the adult. So we could there's you have to understand all these different things.
Okay. So I was going to do a little segment recap, but you just did it right there. So I'm just going to go into the next question. No, that was good, because you're saying that those are the elements of ourselves, of our own persona, that we need to understand.
Yes.
And having that understanding.
The parts of ourself. Remember, the persona is what we put out into the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the self. If you want to be truly self-aware, you got to go past just the basic emotions. The Daniel Goleman and the emotional intelligence movement, they have done a really, really good job scientifically explaining to this society that needs to know data and needs to know all these measurements.
But it is, at the end of the day, it's scientific stuff. That he's
but
a scientist.
But also
journal.
It touches the top of the iceberg,
surface,
you know, and the bottom of the iceberg is so dense and so deep, and it goes so far down.
Well, this is a whole nother layer to it, but you're right when you're talking about if you're having a true level of self-awareness, then you have to get to this element. You can start with the basics.
Absolutely.
And then get into this part of it to really have that understanding. But I think a lot of it has to do with being able to experience these emotions that you just talked about, and being able to feel them, but to feel them in in a proactive way
Yeah.
to experience them.
My thing with emotions is that emotions are a gateway. They're kind of like a guidepost that tells us you need to take a look at this. You know, instead of taking a pill and avoiding what these emotions are telling you.
It's like a barometer. It's
It's
like
a
you're taking a
barometer.
temperature to find out where you're at there. And so some people they take things to avoid them. And some people.
And this is why you have to go in your quest, because I think that this is the way that the quest starts. You know, it's by listening to those emotions, by understanding and how did that, it makes me, why is this happening? And dive deeper into that portion to get to know, to push your greater potentiality and see that there's something more to you.
Okay. So then my next question is, we discussed on our episode of emotional and social intelligence, the ways in which you can become a little more self-aware, right? They were very basic, but you're talking about a different level of self-awareness. At least that's what I'm getting from this whole conversation. So if that's the case, then how do we become more aware of this part?
Yeah.
From your experience, because you've obviously gone into this realm. A lot of people haven't. A lot of people don't know about Jung and the archetypes and things like that. That's foreign to some people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is and it isn't.
Okay, so explain that, because for the people who don't know some people don't know who Carl Jung is, you know?
So I'll give you an example. This is one of my favorite stories, right? And it actually comes from the Bible.
Good.
Yeah. And again, when you read the Bible, you have to read it for what it is. You know, it's a book of metaphors, and you have to dive deep into what it represents, you know. So my favorite story in the Bible is Jesus spending 40 days and 40 nights in the desert and being tempted by the devil, right? You know, the 3 temptations. And the way that story was explained to me by Ken Mullen, actually, and the way that why I like it so much is because, let's assume that Jesus was God, right? But unless he spent 40 nights and 40 days in the desert being tempted, he wouldn't have known what it meant to be human. And I find that to be so powerful, because through that, he understood the potential for temptation, for riches, take control of all the nations, you know, that physical temptation, that I think that's the stage that our society is in right now, that we focus primarily on all that is material. So he had to overcome that temptation in order to be human, and in order to be human, but then transcend that. Right? Then he had to overcome the fear of hunger. You know, you're a God. Why don't you just turn the stones to bread? You know, he had to be able to overcome that. That's also a material thing. Overcome poverty, overcome those things. You know, the last one is like throw yourself, and nothing's going to happen to you because you're a God. Vanity. What is it in the Devil's Advocate? Vanity, my favorite sin, right?
Yeah.
So,
The Devil's Advocate. That was a good movie.
A great movie. So when you look at that, those are aspects that we have to confront, because it doesn't matter how much we achieve. Look at the state of the world. I mean, if you look at the state of the world and the levels of anxiety, fear, and angst, right? Doesn't come from people not developing the great acumen of technology or thinking. Those things are already all said and done. We are capable. But look at the society that we're building, a society of separation based. A lot of it has to do with people not being able to overcome those 3 fears. But on a practical sense, like you have to understand that.
Yeah.
But to get started, because you have to always get started, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is number one, you have to really understand your emotions. They are the gateway to get you to those deeper levels.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand your emotions. And the way that I always done it is I've always journaled how I felt, you know, and I went back and I looked and I said, you know, I've like a dumb person. One time I threw out like, you know, a whole bunch of notebooks of journals just because. But that always helped me make sense of where I was and the way that I was feeling. You know, that's one of the and through that I was able to kind of to make some sense of things. And it's been a progression, and it takes and again, it's been my journey, so I can't tell you that my journey is going to be the same one as you. It's just, you know, what I've done. You know, something else that I've always done is I've read a lot. I've read a lot of things. The first book that really got me into this was "I'm Okay, You're Okay," and the reason the reason behind that book is transactional analysis gives you like another foundation as to part of who you are and where it comes from. You know, you have the child who is the impulse to create and be free. You have the parent, which the impulse is to protect and to subjugate at time. I mean, those two things are dangerous by themselves. And the adult is the one being that's in control, that manages the two of them as to when is it appropriate. It's like the gas and brake. Yeah. The parent is the one in charge of that. But these are aspects of ourselves that we don't understand, that we need to get to know. So that's one book that's really helped me to get started, understanding my emotions, journaling.
And you'll put that in like the...
Yes, I'll put it in the description. I'm Okay, You're Okay is one of my favorite books of all time. It taught me a lot about understanding grace and understanding forgiveness, because you have to be able to understand that if somebody does something to you, it's really because they don't know any better. Yeah. God forbid them, for they know not what they do. And that is the ultimate forgiveness. And I've learned that through that book. And I understand also my different emotions. You know, if you want to get more into it, you know, Men and His Symbols, it's Carl Jung. It's a book that talks about all the symbology that happens all across the different mythologies of the world. You know, the Essential Jung is another one. The archetypes, if you want to dive into those archetypes, you know. One book that is interesting that I've been reading to understand more about archetypes is Jung and the Tarot cards. There's like 22 tarot cards, and they are all archetypes. And they are symbolisms of the things and the stages that we take in our journey through life. So there's a lot of interesting things that you could actually do.
It's basically what I'm getting from what you're saying is that you have to be able to be more curious about or have that level of desire to want to be more self-aware.
Yes.
And have an understanding of that aspect of yourself.
We are at a stage in the world where we are in the self-help you know, time frames in which a lot of this stuff you have to do on your own. You know, there's been a huge decline in our trust in religious institutions and government institutions. So the guidance that was there for prior generations, it's no longer there, nor it's no longer has the same. It no longer has the same sway or the same power as it once did. You know, there's a lot of distrust in these institutions because this is what they were meant to do. So then when you don't have an institution in which you can't trust, right? Where do you go? Yeah. And who do you trust? Right? And the idea is that's the part that gets a little tricky. Yeah. Because can you trust? I mean, anybody could come and tell you, I have the anecdote, or this is the question, this is the answer.
Right.
You know, if you do this for 15 days, 30 days, you're going to levitate. I'm just fucking around. If you do this for 30 days, you're going to be perfect.
Yeah.
You could, this is copywriting. It's like, you could let go of all these issues by doing this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. And we fall into that because we're looking for answers to how, my God, it's like I'm doing all this, but I'm still feeling empty.
Yeah.
And a void, and I'm doing things that are, and I would like to stop, but I don't know how. Again, religions, mythology, all these things were supposed to help us do this, do transition through all this stuff.
Right.
But we no longer trust them,
Yeah.
So the idea is to be able to listen to yourself, listen to your emotions, catalog those things, read books that have to do with that, right? And if somebody tells you, I have an answer for you, this is the way, run. There's things that you could take from people. There's things that you could take and then you could like learn from what they're saying. That's why we share stories, because there are common denominators, but you have to put those paths together. It's like, to finish this section, I will kind of like invoke Morpheus from the Matrix, I told you that I could only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's what we are. Like, we have to take it into our hands to take our journey on.
I think one thing that you probably left off of this that you might have wanted to touch on, because I know that we've talked about it in the past, is that is beneficial to getting to know yourself and your tendencies and your behaviors and why you respond to things in certain ways, is to do like a self-assessment.
Yes.
Because that really helped. I mean, that really, like I had throughout my whole doctoral program, we were asked to take self-assessments as part of the whole learning process.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, I learned so much about myself as a result of those things. And then I ended up doing more of my own, just to explore those, like the Enneagram, the Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many out there. It's ridiculous.
I remember that my previous job, I was actually introducing students to the Myers-Briggs and their personality test. And somebody kind of, I don't have the certification, nor am I affiliated with them, but I've used it personally. Oh, you're not certified on it. And it's like, yeah, you want to give me $4,000? I get certified. But it doesn't mean that it's not a good tool to use.
No,
so great. Typically I use like 16personalities.com. We're not an affiliate with them. I just like using it. Yeah. And what I like about that is, again, it's surface level.
Yeah.
Right? It gives you your strengths and your weaknesses.
Right.
Because you have to understand too, you got to understand polarities within yourself. You have to be able to understand those too.
Right.
And what the Myers-Briggs does, and actually Myers-Briggs, most of the basis of the Myers-Briggs is the study on archetypes by Carl Jung.
Exactly.
Intuitive, EINSJT.
I don't remember them all either.
Anyway, so
judging,
and the thing is that there are businesses right now are beginning to understand the importance of the personalities, the pluses and the minuses, because again, it's like that child, that parent, and the adult being able to understand, and we have to be able to understand within ourselves these different forces. And knowing when to put the gas and when to put the brake.
Exactly.
So that way we could actually move forward and learn and enjoy and live more fulfilling.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Well, that was good. You recapped it for me again. I mean, basically, it's just to get to know yourself. And I know you've taken on my spotlight. Okay, basically, just building our self-awareness is doing that. Like you said, the assessments, being curious, journaling, being more mindful and things like that. So that, that's basically what in a nutshell, what you're talking about, which makes sense. So that's what I've been doing. So yeah.
So we talked about all that, right? We talked about the self, the totality of it, just not just being aware on the superficial level, but being aware of it on a more holistic way. Oh, holistic. So
what was that about?
no, I just
holistic. Oh,
yeah.
Big
Hey,
word.
Big word. What is self-regulation? Like what how would you describe it? What is it? What is self-regulation?
So self-regulation, to just be succinct, is basically the ability to manage your emotions, basically, and to regulate those emotions as they come on. I think in our last episode, I talked about the scientific aspect of it, which is what Goleman talks about, because he talks about the amygdala. And some people say amygdala. I don't know. I say amygdala. That's
you
how
say
I
like medulla oblongata from the Waterboy.
That's actually funny.
You know what? You know what they also call it, like the lizard brain, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think this is like the very primitive
Oh, okay.
brain.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't hear that. I've never heard that. But anyways, what Goleman talks about from the scientific level, but it's important to understand is that the amygdala is where all of the emotions are stored.
Yeah.
And so all those emotions that you just talked about, sadness, anxiety, whatever, fear, joy,
disgust,
all of that is housed in that area. And what happens is whenever you're in a situation where things get escalated, you get fired from a job, you lose a loved one, you fight with your spouse or significant other, a myriad of emotions flood in, and like an influx of stuff happens because you feel a range of stuff. I mean, I get like hot, panicky, sweat. I'm like, I'm about to tell somebody off. I get confrontation. I get angry.
And these are almost uncontrollable, right?
It feels uncontrollable, and that's the whole point of self-regulation.
Okay.
Because what happens is you're flooded with this, and when you're able to self-regulate and self-manage those feelings, then what happens is you control that knee-jerk reaction that people will often have in those moments where you're flooded with these emotions. And that's the important thing to recognize. And I think whenever, like if you're in a Walmart, I use Walmart because that's my favorite store on the whole planet. So I know, I'm lying. Okay. But if you're in Walmart and people get upset with you, or Publix or any of these places, and somebody bumps into you with a shopping cart, what's the first thing you do? Excuse me. Watch where you're going. Like if you regulate, then you don't react in that way. That's, or if you're having a fight with your significant other, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about with that.
But that's hard to do. I mean, it's not I mean, you see it now. It's just people just fly off the handle.
But if people were able to regulate those emotions, imagine how many people. Think about road rage, and how many we've heard instances here, in the last year or two, where people have literally, like, they've shot each other up and stuff and whatever over road rage. Over what? Somebody cut somebody off or whatever. Like, come on.
You know what? I see this also too is like in our democratic political system, is like there's big. Like there's so much vitriol and hatred that there's nothing ever getting done, and all you see is just fighting. I mean, you see the pundits and everybody is just
And how counterproductive is it when we get that way? There's minutes, hours that are lost.
Lives,
just that.
Actually, just lives
and
too.
lives. More importantly, lives that are lost because of that. And so I think that when you're able to self-regulate, a lot of those ugly situations that tend to arise could be avoided. The other aspect of self-regulation is that, you talked about this earlier, is that you're able to, when you self-regulate your emotions, when you have gotten to that place where you can actually manage that, you can actually start to see the good in other people, which sort of piggybacks on the whole road rage and bumping into somebody in Publix or Walmart or whatever, and the democratic thing. You start to look at people with soft eyes, I guess is what you would say, because you start to see, okay, maybe they're not coming from a bad place, and not everybody's like that. Not everybody thinks that way. The first thing that people do is they get very they get defensive. They're protecting they're protecting themselves,
their ideas, their thoughts,
and they're not thinking, you know what? Let me be open to what this person is saying. Let me try to understand what they're saying. Let me engage in a productive, not counterproductive, a productive and proactive conversation so that we can get to a place where there's this understanding, you know what I mean? And that you can actually have meaningful dialogue with people.
So since self-regulation, then we're talking about gateways. This is kind of like the gateway for empathy.
Yes.
Because if you're able to understand how difficult it is for you to regulate these emotions, and then how it feels afterwards, then you become more empathetic as to how somebody is. That
right. Yes.
a good assessment?
And what I was going to say for my final diving deep into self-regulation is that one of the most important aspects of, there's many important facets to, or domains to the self-regulation aspect, but is exercising self-compassion.
Okay.
So because
what do you mean? What do you mean by that? I've been a little bit at loss on this self-compassion, self-care, and all that stuff. Talk to me about that.
So self-compassion is different than sympathy. So empathy and sympathy are different. I think I talked about that in our episode too. Before, but compassion is a whole nother, to me, okay, I have not studied compassion or anything like that. But for me, self-compassion is being able to be self-forgiving for the things that you do.
Okay.
So when you're going through the process of learning self-awareness and self-regulation, you're going to have moments where you fuck up. You're going to do something and you're like, oh crap, I shouldn't have responded that way. That's not what, that is your first sign that you're on the right track, because you realize that you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Number two, then what do? Beat yourself up, which, we tend to do. Personally, I tend to beat myself up.
Yeah.
And instead exercise self-compassion, just understanding that this is not the position that I was in this position. I reacted this way. I don't want to be this way. Just being compassionate towards ourselves, because when we exercise self-compassion, then what happens is we're able to extend grace. When you just talked about that, grace to other people.
Yeah. That reminds me of,
and self-compassion is little things like, you know what, I'm going to take an extra long shower today, or I'm going to go get my nails done, or I'm going to, I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. I'm going to go and sit by the water. I'm going to go get myself an ice cream cone. It could be anything. Self-compassion is just accepting that you're a human being.
That I think that one of the things that is a contributor to that, particularly that society, is this adversity to failure.
Yeah.
Because we are so, through our education system, as we are brought up, failure is looked at as the no-no.
There's an aversion to that.
And the aversion to that, and when it does happen, or not that it happens, but if you have setbacks, you go back to that and you feel yourself not worthy, not enough.
Exactly.
I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm this and that and the other. And
how many people give up? They just throw in the towel. I'm just not going to do this.
So, but a lot of it doesn't come there primarily because of you. It's because your social conditioning, and the way that things have developed. Because you have to be a success to be somebody in our society,
right?
According to quote unquote. That's a broad definition of success, but. Yeah. But that's like what our culture as a totality.
Yeah, if you're using a broad paintbrush, definitely, because that's what happens. Is we unfortunately we're victims of societal pressures and the expectations of society.
Yeah.
But the self-regulation portion comes in, and that ability to connect with the self, because that's what we're talking about: the quest, our journey, our path, the things that we're on. The fulfillment of your person, right?
Finding out who you are.
Yes. Yeah. In order to do that, you have to have self-regulation or self-management and self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because you cannot discover that person that you are, that authentic self, that authentic person, unless you're able to overcome these emotions and master the art of regulating your responses to societal pressures and people and things that happen, because we are going to fail. And people who know they're going to fail accept it, dust their knees off, and they move on and they try a different route, or they ask for help, or they do whatever it takes. Yeah. And that takes a lot of courage.
He does.
You know what I mean? And it takes a lot of self-compassion, because you have to be able to say, okay, what went wrong? And this is regulation. This is management. What went wrong? Being self-aware. This is what I could have done different. This is how, and have their little boards up of this and that. And this is what we're going to do this time. This is how we're going to, you understand? And that's all a part of that awareness and regulation.
That reminds me of the continuous improvement cycle.
Yeah.
You know, which you plan something, you put it to practice, you evaluate it, and then you go back and forth. So there's really...
And you're sorry to cut you out, your 3 C's, check, cancel, continue.
Check, cancel, and continue. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Awesome.
Because you when you do that, you start to get more, it becomes a habit. Oh, okay, now I'm on a roll here, and this is working for me, and I'm feeling better, and I'm not as reactive, and I don't feel so angry, and my blood pressure is low, you know, things like that.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. Yeah. So my final question would be, how do we build, or can we build and enhance both our self-awareness and, sorry, I'm going to have to cut that out because I fucked that up.
Okay.
Big time.
Okay.
So how can we build or enhance our self-regulation? How do we do that?
Okay. So a lot of people are going to be like, when I say all this stuff, they're going to be like, that's ridiculous, like whatever. But I think that, let me just preface this whole thing with, if you want it, you'll do it.
Try it.
That's
Give it
the
a
bottom
shot.
line. That's the bottom line. If you want something, you're going to try it. You know what I mean? And so I think that, you know, for me, my philosophy on life is that you have to be able to, that like self-development and self-improvement is important to me personally, to my discovering myself, the real Jessie.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that, one, you have to practice self-awareness.
Yeah.
You have to be aware.
You know what made me think of our Kabbalah teacher, Abraham Kelman. Abraham. He used to do this chart on the board when he was teaching about self-development. It's a kind of like a graph. So you start at 0 and you start going up, and you don't go as much. And then the more you keep doing it, the more you improve. Yeah. Then you start increasing exponentially and growing as an individual. And that's the thing. That's what self-actualizing is. That's why I don't like because it's not a definite.
There's no end point.
You're always discovering. We're discovering more about the universe as we go. We have to discover more about ourselves. So is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, because I think that, this is where I was saying that it's going to sound a little weird for me. And I agree, because we're always self-actualizing. We never arrive. People who think they arrive, you just don't arrive. And I'm saying it in a nice way. You still have more potential. You know what I mean? There's so much more that you can expand on. You know what I mean?
Or discover.
But if you
and grow,
put yourself in a box, you're going to stay in the box.
Yeah.
But if you know that I'm always self-actualizing, I have so much more growth and so much more potential, then all of a sudden you're out of the box. You're coloring outside of the lines. And that feels good sometimes, you know? But I would say that the one thing that for me, again, this is going to sound weird, but I think that it's important. It's almost like you have to become the observer of yourself. So, you know, when you're looking in a mirror, just to put it practically, when you're looking in a mirror, you're looking at yourself, right? So that's what I'm talking about, is being the observer of you in those moments. So in those moments, for example, when I'm talking with you, there are moments when you might say something that pisses me off, and I'm just like, to take, instead of
a lot of things that piss you off.
Instead of reacting, don't be putting our business out there, okay?
That's fine.
To instead of reacting, you know, to listen to what it is that you're saying. But in that moment, I'm observing what is my facial reaction, what is my disposition, you know, what is my body language saying? Is it receptive? Am I being reactive? Am I being, you know, and that takes a lot of conscious effort. And a lot of people are like, I don't have time for that shit. I just don't have time for that right now. But everybody has time for it. And the thing is that we make the world a better place, and we extend grace and kindness when we do these things.
Well, I'm one of those people, or I was, and I'm continuing to improve on it, because I want to just go, right? Yeah. And one of the things that has helped me to self-regulate and to slow my ass down has been like breathing, like really breathing and just meditating and just focusing on my breathing. And that's pretty much it. Just see it come in, see it come out. And then, like I tell you all the time, it's like I just have like 1,000,001 thoughts just running through there and just sitting there and just looking at this stuff. And and you feel all this anxiety, but it's like you said, it's like I'm like that third party. And trying and just not trying, but just looking at it, right?
And even having the presence of mind, the self-awareness in a moment, if I'm having a discussion with you and I'm just like, oof, I'm not feeling this. This is too much for me. To be able to say, you know what? I'm sorry. I want to hear what you have to say. This is important to me, but right now I just don't have a response for you. I don't have an answer. And I'm not sure that I'm really understanding. So let's just take a minute to, also when I'm around other people, professionals and other people that I deal with, they don't have to see that I'm taking deep breaths, No. But sometimes I just sit there and I listen, and instead of being reactive and saying things and I'm having this very, very innate desire to just respond, I stop myself. And that's a level of self-awareness, and that self-regulation and management comes in that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Other things that I do is like I don't meditate like you do, but I tend to take deep breaths, and I just breathe a couple of times and I'm like, okay. And even in moments where I'm going to respond to something, I've noticed, because I'm trying to be more self-aware, I've noticed that I stop, think about what I'm going to say, and have this program in my mind where I'm like, is this going to benefit the conversation? Or is this going to exacerbate a situation that isn't necessary, provoke something? Yeah. Or is it going to hurt somebody? Yeah. And sometimes I will not say anything at all because I'm like, you know what? It's not important. I'm not that important that I have to say something on every single situation either. You know what I mean? But I also journal. That statement, for instance, it's about understanding who you are, because you might say, I'm not that important, right? Like that's one of the things that we've been talking about, my awareness about the perception of who I am in relation to other people, my ego, and all of those things, and coming to the conclusion of like, maybe it's not that important what I have to say. I think that's a big problem, Omar. I think a lot of people think what I have to say is really important, so I'm going to say it, and I don't care who, and it's like, what is your point? Yeah. Is it really that important that you need to say something that could potentially damage another person? You know what I mean? I think that's the problem when you're talking about the Democrats and Republicans and whatnots and this one and that and the movements that are going on and things like that. Like, let live. And there's progress that we have to make. I'm not disputing that there's things, but I think we're not perfect. But I think that comes with understanding who we are, understanding that other people have different needs than we do. Yes. And that we could have a conversation so that we could find, but that's negotiation, like one-on-one, but we in civil discourse. And it's transactional in nature, because I get from you if I give to you, you know what I mean? And that's a give and take in a relationship. So let's kind of like wrap it up and let's talk about this in a few words. How has self-awareness and self-regulation helped you in your quest? So for me, it's really brought me to a place where I feel more mindful and I feel more intentional about my behaviors and my actions and my thoughts, more importantly, because your thoughts, they can rule you if you let them, right? And being in that mindful space has allowed me to appreciate being in the present, because I used to be the one that was always a planner for the future and always thinking about the past, and that doesn't benefit me. Is what I've come to realize. And so for me, for my quest and what was important for me, because we all have different things and things that we want to accomplish and overcome. For me, it's allowed me the opportunity to really be engaged in the moment, rather than thinking about what I can be doing or what I did, and being present, if that makes sense. Because that that's a lot of it. My emotions and my anxieties. What are our anxieties? Our anxieties are tied to the future.
Our fear of the future. Our fear of the future.
And a lot of our emotions, sadness and things like that. In those moments, yesterday, people at work were asking me, Jess, you're just so quiet, because I'm always laughing and talking and whatever. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I just feel melancholy. I'm not mad, but I'm not sad either. I'm just here. I'm here, you know, and I'm just listening to you fine folks talk about stuff. I'm fine with that, you know, and I'm good. And that was a lot for me, because I was like, wow, I'm just sitting here and I'm listening to people talk about stuff, and everybody was talking about little things here and there. And it was interesting just to listen to people. Yeah. And I was in that moment. You know what I mean? And that's what it has done for me.
Okay.
What about for you? So we can end this episode.
Yeah. My 20s were a blur. But my late teens and the 20s were a blur, because I really truly didn't get a grasp on this. I was searching for stuff, but you know, you still are caught up between desires and fears. You know, fear for the future, and it led me to make some poor decisions, primarily professionally.
Mm-hmm. That knee-jerk reaction.
And financially. I mean, those been the two aspects of my life that have been more complicated than anything else. But now, as I gotten older, and I began to truly understand the sources of anger, the things that I could stand up for and the things that are not important, understanding aspects of my personality, the dual nature, you know, my impulsivity, my passion that is misconstrued in many different ways. Like understanding these things kind of like have me where I am right now. Then it has allowed me to discover a passion that I have, which is this, you know, and he's given me like creative juices to always, oh wow, look at this, oh look, let me connect the dots when it comes to that, you know. So being able to dive a little deeper below the line of the iceberg, or just going just a little bit below it, it's helping me to understand, and it's helping me to interact with people a little bit different. I still have a problem with authority. I still have a problem with that aspect of situations. But I have have an issue with status quo. But I know that has its time and place, and I need to learn to be able to mitigate it. So it's a work in progress.
It always is.
But it's gotten me here, and I feel good about the space that I'm in. And there's been a lot of negative things that I had to overcome. That's a part of the quest. That is the part of the quest, and I'm thankful for that.
If you like this episode, make sure that you leave us a comment. We want to hear from you. Also, make sure you check us out on our website at asoulsquest.com. Don't forget to subscribe.